Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Tag Your It podcast. I am your host, Ebony, and I've got my partner in crime, Daylon. Daylon, say what's up.
What's up, good people? Long time no speak.
Long time no speak. We know. Listen, we already know we've been out the mix for a little bit. I've had a few people coming up to me like, hey, where's the next podcast? And so I apologize, but we're glad to be back. We have been working hard for the money. We've been doing projects. We've been doing workshops and trainings. We have been out and about in conferences, networking, and we're really excited to unveil with you all what we've learned, what we've been sharing, and I think we got a really good topic to start with in that sharing
Sure.
today. What do you think, Dayline?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's going to be one that people are going to find some value in, and maybe not a topic that you had top of mind, but that's part of why we're doing it.
Exactly. So let's get right into it. The theme of today is, drumroll please, ageism. We are talking about ageism, the silent-ism. And so I want to give you a little bit of background into why we're talking about this particular topic and how it's gotten so hot amongst our colleagues, peers, and working people all together. So some of you all might know that I've done quite a bit of work in the realm of microaggressions. We've done a few workshops, we've done some trainings, we've even done some podcasts on microaggressions. So I had this opportunity to partner with my friend Nicole over at Dynata, and we did a study related to microaggressions and trying to understand how people think about microaggressions, that they consider all microaggressions. So thinking about sexism, thinking about racism, thinking about anti-Semitism, do they think about all of these microaggressions the same? And what we found in this study was that people were less likely to acknowledge a middle aged person experiencing a microaggression because of their age than literally everyone else. And when I say everyone else, I mean than even a person who just is living their life and had a microaggression asserted them versus anybody else. Middle aged people were the least likely. And so since we had this founding, since we did this presentation, industry peers have literally been resonating with the subject and clamoring to learn more. And so, not to mention the fact we have 5 generations in the workplace today, right? 5. That's a lot of
Yeah,
us
there's a
working
lot.
together. And so
It's a lot.
that definitely builds up the potential for there to be conflict in the workplace. So we want to talk about this. All right. So to get started, I think that it's really important that we get a grounding on ageism, the ageism definition. And Dayline, y'all may not know this, but this man has all the experience in training and leading different groups of people. He's had up to like 200 people that he was managing. And so I think he's got a good handle on this. And so I really am excited to hear your perspective on this topic. So, how about we start with that? Tell us, what is the definition of ageism?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just say that, coming up through the ranks and working with a variety of teams has been able to shape my experiences in such a tremendous way that it's one of the ways that I even know that ageism is a thing because I've seen it firsthand. And it's something, as you mentioned, like with the other isms, they're much louder and they're already deemed inappropriate. But this one, though, specifically as it relates to ageism, it refers to ultimately the prejudice, the stereotype, or the discrimination against anyone because of their age, right? So it's based on their age, right? And so think of prejudice in terms of how we feel, right? Kind of a
Mm-hmm.
tie some word association there. So prejudice mean how we feel. Think of stereotyping of how we think, so like our unconscious
Yeah.
bias, our cognitive shortcuts, and then think of discrimination as how we act. And so when you
Yeah.
start to talk about that, it's like, okay, so how do we think about people as it relates to age? How do we feel about people as it relates to their age? And then how do we act to people as it relates to their age? And when we start to break that down, when we treat people specifically based on their age and not their merit, especially as we're talking about in the workplace,
Yeah.
merit, character, etc., then that's when we can involve ourselves in ageism and honestly be a undercover ageist, if you will, not even knowing that we have some type of, like I said, unconscious bias towards age. It's out there, and so that in short is the definition. But it literally is something that is happening every single day not only in our workplace, but in the environment as well, like society.
You know what? When I opened this up, I was thinking about middle-aged people in particular or older people, but you just said
Yeah,
prejudice related to age. So
correct.
that indicates that this could also be related to younger people too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think from a bird's eye view, we're like, oh, ageism is just talking about how people are how people are discriminating against those that are just older. And I'm like, that may have been the thing that had been brought to the forefront more than others, but both sides, as we'll talk about here, are
Mhm.
really are really at different ends of the spectrum, but they both are facing different things, right? Like you mentioned the experience that I have just briefly, like as someone like myself, like I've experienced those. Might call it. I think you might even categorize it as like youngism, but it's still under ageism. It's still under that bracket, if
Yeah.
you will, right? Where it's like, hey, I'm old enough to be your father. Like, okay, great. Why do you say that?
Yeah.
Just because I'm 23 and you're 46? Like those things happen. I think we always think like, oh, this person's 60, they're not tech savvy, and I think we see that one a little bit more, but we maybe don't see both sides of it. And in seeing both sides is what's going to make people more sensitive to it, excuse me, and more aware as well.
Okay, so you just gave a couple of, I think,
Just a couple of
commonplace
nuggets,
examples.
couple of nuggets.
Yeah. Yeah, you gave a couple commonplace examples because you're right, like, it's really easy to look at somebody younger and be like, "I'm old enough." How many times have we heard that? "I'm old enough to be your mama," you know?
Right.
But can you
Playfully,
give
playfully joking, like those kind of things, right? And it's those things mean something though, right? Even though it said jokingly, it does. Those little digs start to like dig certain things out, start to invalidate you in small ways, right? Over time.
Delon, it happens all the time, and it's interesting it's interesting. I wanted you to give a couple more examples
Mm.
if you can, but since we're already here, I'm just gonna say this. I'm in my late 30s now. You're in your late 30s right now. We're knocking on the door
I'm
of
closer
40.
to I'm closer to 40
I
than I
know.
am 30. Let's put it that way.
Yes. It's true. It's true. We're knocking on the door of 40, and at this grown age, this big age that we're at,
Big.
I find myself saying more often, like, "These kids." Like, if you're not in the
Mm.
30 plus club, it's really easy to think about, like, younger people having less experience, having less
Yeah,
wisdom, and, now
correct.
that we're having this conversation, and everybody, I wanna make sure that I say this and throw this caveat out there. When we talk about microaggressions, we say that everybody has likely been an offender of a microaggression. So I'm just go ahead and raise my hand. Even though we are the teachers of this session, we can admit that we have been offenders of microaggressions as well. And as we're talking about it, I'm thinking, like, how many times have I been an ageist when I have made a comment that has been related to, like, oh, that's just they're so young, they don't even know anything yet. We do it all the time. Do it
Yeah,
all the time.
absolutely. And a lot of that honestly boils down to our cultural obsession with youth from the time that we are born to when we are in our preteens, we become a teen. Everyone wants to grow up, but no one wants to get old,
No,
right?
you're right.
Think about it like, oh, I can't wait to drive. I can't wait to have my own bank account, my own credit card. I can't wait to be on my own. And then you start aging. You're like, whoa, 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 whoa. What's happening? Why? Because it, we associate youth with strength, with energy, dynamic, right? All of these buzzwords, right? Adjectives that we're using to describe ourselves are associated with being young. And then everything else is categorized as undesirable, right?
Mhm.
And we bring that same notion into the workplace, right? When I'm like, again, like you said, everyone's engaged in it. So I know at times I've like, all right, so and so is in their 50s. They've been here 20 years. I'm probably not going to give them the new rollout of the new technological advancement in our company,
Mm.
like in our store. Now that's not because I actually sat down with the individual and talked to them about it, but
Yeah.
I just wanted it to be easier, and it was easier to give it to somebody else.
Wow.
But then what you realize what you're doing is you are literally limiting that individual's potential in their
Absolutely.
workspace. You're limiting them from getting that experience and that challenge. And again, like I said, I didn't actually have the conversation and sit down and say, hey, how do you even feel about this to assess it? Because it's like saying that people in their 50s or 60s don't understand tech. I think we have a stereotype that those individuals don't understand tech, right? And there are some people who don't. But I think what we've talked about before, Ebony, is that there is a difference between, right, you have an experience and then you being exposed to something. And so we
Yeah.
talked about that. We talked about that before. And I think that's a really important point, like experience versus exposure. Those two things can go hand in hand, but there is a bit of a differentiator because just because I'm younger doesn't mean that I haven't been exposed to it. Right.
Right.
You could be experiencing something, but not exposed to it to the way that I have. And so those things are play off one another. And I think it's an important point for anyone trying to increase how they understand ageism and how it comes to life and how there's value in what, whether you're young or you're older in the workplace.
I think that's an excellent point. It's an
Yeah.
excellent point because, that was gonna be my next question. I'm like, the
Yeah.
reality is, and again, you and I are experiencing this now, like, we have far more experience now that we are getting older, and we are appreciating having the experience that we have and appreciating the wisdom that we have, right? Like,
Right.
as an
Yeah.
older as a more mature female, right now, I feel like I'm a more efficient worker than I ever was. I feel like I'm a more
Mm-hmm.
confident worker than I ever was because I have that
Yeah.
wisdom, because I have that experience, and because I've had that exposure. And so
Mm-hmm.
I love the point that you're making here about exposure versus lived years. Like, that
Yeah.
doesn't
Yeah.
mean
Versus lit.
so an
Yeah.
older
Exactly.
person so an older person, I think that stereotypes would tell us that people of a certain age may not be as quick on their feet when it comes to technological or digital advances. But if they have the exposure, if they have, there are certain skills and, experiences that in fact does make them well equipped and skilled to do work in that realm.
Yeah.
And it's unfair
No,
to assume that they can't.
it is. It really is. And I think again, this podcast is meant to bring awareness to that. And so we talked about the cultural tension, or the cultural obsession, excuse me. But the next thing that was on my mind too that goes into this is the generational tension, right? There are
Okay.
things that I've seen. There are things that I've seen amongst the generations. Let's take millennials versus boomers because that is typically
Mhm.
two generations that is always put against one another. The boomers are
Okay.
always like the boomers literally birthed the millennials, right? So our parents, right? Uh, but
Yeah.
there's this tension because millennials are saying, "Hey, you're taking all the high paying jobs. You're in your 60s and 70s now. It's time for you to roll out, right?"
Yes. Can I mention that?
And
I really wanna throw that
yeah,
out. I
yeah,
wanna give
sure,
this example because I one of the things we want to do is talk about examples, and in my conversations, I've been talking with people, and, I heard in conversation, there was one white, older male, and I believe he was South Asian, so I believe he's
okay,
Indian descent, older male, and they both were expressing, and when I say older, I mean, like, early 50s, mid to early 50s, and they were
yeah,
both expressing how it was younger people, mainly females, who are expressing discontent in their ineligibility of a promotion because they felt like they were more qualified as younger people, but these men
right,
were less qualified, and
yeah,
no real rhyme or reason, which left them to feel like, "Okay, so you're counting me out because I'm older, because I'm doing the work and I'm doing it well,
yeah,
but you
yeah,
feel like you deserve it."
yeah, absolutely. And that is real tension right now that we are facing in the workplace, and we will be facing that for the foreseeable. Especially think about this now as the millennials age, right? We are a part
Yes,
of that. You and I are, for all intents and
it's true.
purposes, we're like the elder statesmen of millennials. Like we're getting
Yeah.
there now to where in the next 10 to 15 years, right, we'll have those behind us, right, saying, "Hey, you're taking forever," right? We'll have the Gen Zers saying, "Hey, you're taking forever." So we'll have the Gen Alphas, and they'll keep going
Oof.
on unless we consistently are aware that though we are different, especially as it relates to
Mhm.
workplace, though we are different, our unique experiences is what makes us valuable. And so what I bring to the table is different than what you bring to the table. But when we both bring
Right.
those things to the table together, there's
Yep.
strength. And
Yep.
so you're not someone, so I shouldn't be fearful of you, like, oh, this young person's coming in to take my job, but I should be actually like almost like coming together in like, I need to I want to align myself with Ebony because she may know something that I don't know and vice versa.
Listen to
However,
me.
yeah, but
I want to tell
I'll say this
you.
one point real quick. However, the challenge though, the challenges that happens is that we never take that time to get into that space, right? But we spend more time in, calling the older person in the office uncle or grandpa, or we spend more time saying saying rookie, right? Oh, they're rookie. Oh, come on, sport, right? We spend more time falling into those things, right? Those stereotypes, those
Yes, it's
boxes,
true.
and that
It's
we
true.
don't we can't ever get outside of that box and actually start to play in the playground together because we're just like walking in our preconceived notions of who individuals are without actually spending time with them. But no, I'm sorry.
And
Go
to
ahead.
be,
You
no,
said something.
I think to be clear, when people make those comments like auntie, uncle, or grandpa, or even sport rookie, they're not even meant to be offensive in many cases.
No, they're
In
not.
many cases, they're meant to
But the
be
relationship is
endearing.
missing. Yeah,
But if the relationship doesn't exist, then it
exactly.
becomes problematic. That's right. Because and this is where I was going to go before.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely am thinking now, like when you said like coming together and actually seeing what you can take away or learn, I am definitely looking at my IG and seeing like 40 or 60 is the new 40. I'm looking at the likes of Angela Bassett. Like there are women
Yes.
who are looking better than I do. Who
Mm-hmm.
are of a certain
Mm-hmm.
age, and I am literally trying to figure out like what are they doing so that I can be like that. Like I want to be like that. And I think that this conversation is so imperative right now because like you mentioned, all we have to do is keep breathing to experience ageism. Like different from the reason why we're calling this ageism, the silent ism, is because literally with every other ism, when you think about racism, I am a black woman. If you are a white male, you relating to me as a black woman, while yes, you can have empathy, you relating to me as a black woman is going to be a lot harder, right? And somebody relating to a person in the LGBTQ community is going to be a lot harder. You know what I'm saying? But
Yeah.
as people, all we got to do is breathe, and we're going to
Yeah.
all at some point age. At some point we are all going to age and become older people. So this is the
Mm-hmm.
easiest, the most
Yeah.
this is the easiest low hanging fruit of the
Isms.
discriminations of the isms to
Mm-hmm.
understand. And so this conversation is far more important than what I think we ever have placed on our radar today. So let's wrap
Mm-hmm.
this up, Daylon. Given all that we've shared, what, and maybe it's just a review, like what do we need to do to make sure that we are not ageist offenders of ageism? I know.
Yeah.
Don't laugh at me.
No, I mean, I know, right? There's so much, and I love what you were saying about. I think one of the first things that we can do is realize that aging, outside, short of experiencing early death, is something that we all are going to do. It is the common thread amongst humanity, and so since we are all living longer, we should help one another do that better, right? So realize that if you see that person as a threat to you now, well, that older, say I'm younger and I see that person as older as a threat to me now because they're taking my job or they're hogging up salary or whatnot, and realize that you're going to be there at some point as well.
Yeah.
And I think I've said this in maybe other podcasts and other conversations for sure, but it's like one of those things where it's like everything that I needed to know in life I learned in kindergarten. Like I should teach
Mm,
those, I should treat others the way that I want to be treated, right? That's the kindergarten
yeah.
principle. And it's like do unto others as you would have done to yourself. and realize that there are challenges uniquely being faced by each person. So I think awareness and just having that moment to process your own bias is just important. Listening to a podcast like this, going through the trainings that we offer around microaggressions and ageism and other cultural sensitivity things. Again, if it's not the advocacy group, which we hope it is, getting involved though somewhere and learning more about this, because as we learn more, we become more aware and we do differently, right? And
Mm,
then from, again, just like anything, we can spend all day on this, but I think from just a workplace environment, there should be, whether it's HR or people success, whatever the buzzword is that people are calling it these days, you should have a place where people can come and express themselves, that they're feeling like they're experiencing this. And I think here's the other thing, Ebony. In short, in the workplaces that I've been a part of, there was like a zero tolerance to sexism and racism. Like those things,
okay.
you know what I mean? Like they're loud, but ageism is socially acceptable in many ways. And so I don't know that there are outlets in the workplace for people who that feel like, hey, I feel like I'm being treated differently because of my age, one way or another, young or old, right? However, that's classified. And realizing that ultimately we have to have an outlet for people to be able to voice that concern, and if not, then they're just going to suppress it, and it's going to be like any other thing that gets suppressed. Ultimately it's going to spill over into some type of outburst, or people are going to leave your company because they don't feel valued, they don't feel seen, they don't feel heard. And regardless of ism, that's always important. People want to feel valued, they want to feel heard. This is the next thing to add to your list of things for you as a leader or a person that's in the workplace or a person that cares about how other people feel. Ageism is the thing to add to that list of things that you're watching for and learning more about, for sure.
Yeah, that and before we close off, there's 2 things that I wanna mention because when you were talking, I
Yeah.
just thought about it. One thing in one of our previous conversations you had mentioned that really blew my mind was a lot of times, like, people who are living within an intersection, so perhaps they are, a Jewish man or a Black woman who's older, sometimes they might think that they're experiencing racism when in fact what they're really experiencing is ageism. Like if they're feeling like they're being marginalized, like depending on where you're living in that intersection, you could be experiencing that. And then finally, and I'll rest here, is that we're all living longer. And this is
Hmm.
this is actually a possible benefit to living, finding your purpose, working longer. And so uh this is something for us to really think about and appreciate one another. It's wonderful to see people who are older still in the workforce, still being
Yeah.
able to work in the workforce. That's actually a bigger blessing than it is a nuisance. And I think perhaps we should reframe our mindsets to consider that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You,
oh,
you said a lot there. I will say that the part that you were mentioning about the intersectionality, that's a good, like, kind of part two, because there is a lot there with race and sex and ageism all together that we could spend another hour plus time on. So maybe that's another part two for
okay.
another day. But
I
fantastic.
like that.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah.
All right. Well, listen, you all, thank you so much for joining us again. Daylon let you all know about, if you want to hear more about this, holler at us because we do have the resources and we are excited to have this conversation. But also check us up on Instagram. It's advocacy GRP. And then we also are on LinkedIn. So check us out on our platforms. We want to hear from you and also leave us a comment. All right. Till next time, people.
Take
Peace.
care. Peace.